You don't forget the sound of your name being read off a warrant. You don't forget the cold snap of steel cuffs against your wrists. And you sure as hell don't forget the look in your granddaughter's eyes when she sees you dragged away like a dog. It was the 4th of July, Iron Ridge's annual parade. The streets were dressed in red, white, and fake smiles. I was sitting on the bench outside May's diner, sipping coffee and nodding along to stories I'd already heard a dozen times. Kids waved flags. People cheered. And then, gunfire. Short, sharp bursts that cut through the brass band and balloons. Screams. Blood. Chaos. 15 people dead. 30 injured. The worst tragedy the town had ever seen. And they pinned it on me. Colonel Warren Briggs. Retired war hero. 74 years old. Arthritis in both knees and a pacemaker that flickered whenever I used the microwave. Apparently, I had also become a mass murderer. They found fingerprints on the rifle. My rifle. A vintage M1 Garand I hadn't touched in 10 years. Gunpowder residue on my clothes. A confession letter. Typed. Signed, W.B. And a witness who swore they saw me walking away from the scene with a duffel bag. The media loved it. Patriot-turned-killer, elderly monster behind parade massacre, they slapped my picture on every screen in the country, cropped from a family picnic where I was smiling with my granddaughter Rosie. They didn't show the full photo, the one where my son, Adam, stood next to me. They never mentioned Adam at all. I pleaded not guilty. They rolled out the evidence like a magician's trick. Open and shut, the prosecutor called it. 12 jurors agreed. And just like that, I was buried in Steel Pine Correctional Facility, cell block D4. Inmate 445,091. I didn't scream. Didn't cry. Didn't beg. Because somewhere, deep in my bones, I knew, someone in my family did this. 2 weeks into prison, I got a letter. No return address. Just a smudged envelope slipped into my commissary bin. Inside, a single sentence, "Forgive me, but it had to be you." Typed. No signature. That's when I stopped waiting for the system to fix itself. I started remembering everything. The way Adam stopped calling 2 months before the shooting. How he'd been twitchy during our last barbecue, constantly checking his phone. How he avoided looking me in the eye when I asked about his job with that security consulting firm. I raised Adam alone after his mother passed. I taught him how to ride a bike, how to fish, how to drive. I thought I taught him honor. But he was always a little too slick, a little too smooth. He never liked being told no. And he hated being in my shadow. Still, I couldn't believe it. Not entirely. Until I heard what he said on the wiretap. It was a fluke. A fight broke out in the rec yard. A guard dropped his radio. I picked it up before he noticed and overheard the word Ashfall. I knew that name. It wasn't a place. It was a group. A paramilitary ring that operated in shadows. I'd heard rumors from my time overseas. And now it was here, connected to Adam's name. I started asking questions. Making trades. Doing favors. And little by little, I uncovered the truth. My son was involved in something big. Guns. Money. Politics. The parade? It wasn't random. It was a message. And they needed someone believable to take the fall. Someone whose face still graced town murals. Someone people would mourn and hate. Me. So I made a plan. I started working out. I pretended to fall in line. I played the old man. But every night, I carved a map into the underside of my bunk. And on the 73rd day of my sentence, when the blackout hit and the alarms failed, I walked out of Steel Pine. Now, I'm not just trying to clear my name. I'm going to expose everything. Ashfall. Adam. The town. And whatever else is rotting beneath the surface of this goddamn country. If you've made it this far, listen to me, they framed me once. But now the truth is watching. And I'm not hiding anymore. Like. Share. Subscribe if you want the truth, because it's going to get dangerous. And before I continue, tell me, where are you from? Because by the time this story is over, you'll realize we're all a lot closer to this kind of betrayal than you think. They say the dead can't speak. But I'm telling you, I heard her. The first place I went after I escaped wasn't some motel or a dark alley, I went to a grave. My wife, Eliza. Buried just outside Iron Ridge, under a crooked willow tree, the kind that we used to sit under in the summer when she braided Rosie's hair and laughed like she didn't know how to be afraid. The dirt was fresh. Not new. But not old either. Someone had been here recently. Someone besides me. I knelt down. My ribs were still sore from the fence jump. My hands were raw. And there, just under the lip of her headstone, scratched in almost invisible lines, July 5th, R. 12, midnight, I ran my fingers across it 3 times before I believed it was real. R. 12. Railroad 12. An old freight line that hadn't been used in decades. It ran west of town, past the industrial outskirts and the scrapyard. Eliza never would have carved that. But Adam knew I visited her. He knew I'd find it. So either it was bait. Or it was something else entirely. A test. I waited until 11:30 that night. Found an old hunting jacket in a dumpster and stole a pair of gloves off a scarecrow in someone's backyard. I could have laughed at the absurdity of it if my chest didn't feel like it had caved in. The tracks were rusted. The gravel crunch was the only sound for miles. And then, at 12:02, headlights flickered from behind the trees. It wasn't a train. It was a black SUV, government plates, no lights on. The window rolled down 2 inches. "You're late," said a voice. I froze. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who believes you." The door cracked open. A woman stepped out. Black ball cap. Combat boots. Scar on her neck like a rope burn. She didn't offer her name, just a flash of something, an ID badge from Homeland Security. But the logo wasn't standard. I only caught a glimpse, an ash tree split in half, with Latin underneath I couldn't read. "Adam's not just in the wind," she said. "He's burning the map behind him. And if you want to catch him, you're going to have to give me something I can't get anywhere else." "I don't have anything." "You do," she said. "You just don't know it yet." Before I could ask another question, she slid a folder into my hand. "Inside this are names. One of them is your son's contact. Find him. Break him. Then we talk again." Then she was gone. No license plate. No trail. I opened the folder by the light of a broken signal post. 5 names. One I recognized instantly. Tommy Creed. My son's childhood friend. Disappeared 5 years ago. Rumor was he died in a boating accident. But I remembered what Adam said once at a barbecue, Tommy always knew how to vanish better than most. So that's where I'm going. To Creed. To whatever version of him is still alive. But here's the twist, the woman in the SUV. She left me with a final warning, whispered like a curse, the people who framed you aren't scared of exposure. They're scared of what you used to know. What they made you forget. And now I can't sleep. Because the truth isn't just out there. It's in my own damn head. Locked behind something they buried long ago. This isn't just about Adam anymore. It's about the war I thought I left behind. And the fire that's about to spread. I'm Colonel Warren Briggs. And I'm coming for the truth. I hadn't seen Tommy Creed in over 20 years. Back when we were just boys, he was the troublemaker with a grin like he knew everything the world wanted to hide. Now, all I could think was, what had he become? I found him holed up in a rundown cabin on the edge of Black Hollow, a forgotten patch of woods nobody visited unless they were running from something, or someone. The place smelled of damp wood and stale smoke. The windows were boarded up, but I saw movement inside. I knocked. No answer. Then the door creaked open, just a crack. Tommy's face peeked out. His eyes were sharper than I remembered, but the lines around them told stories of years spent looking over his shoulder. "Warren Briggs," he said, voice low. "Never thought I'd see you again. Least of all like this." "I'm not here for old times," I said. "I need answers." He stepped back and let me in. Inside, the cabin was sparse. Maps and photos pinned to walls. Notes scrawled in margins. A small arsenal under a tarp in the corner. "This isn't just a hideout," I said. "It's a war room." Tommy nodded. "War's been coming for a while, old man. You just didn't see it because you were busy being a ghost." I asked him about Adam. About Ashfall. Tommy's face darkened. "Adam's deep in it. More than you think. It's not just guns or drugs anymore. Ashfall's got eyes everywhere, in law enforcement, politics, even the military. They're building something." "Building what?" He hesitated. "A network. A shadow government. They want control, complete control. The massacre. It was a message to anyone who'd think about crossing them." "Why frame me?" I asked, bitterness creeping in. "Why not just disappear me quietly?" "Because you're a symbol," Tommy said grimly. "A retired colonel with a spotless record. Perfect scapegoat. The town needed someone to hate, someone to believe was broken." He looked me dead in the eye. "But they underestimated you." I wanted to believe that. But the more I learned, the more tangled the web became. Adam wasn't just a player, he was a kingpin in training. Then Tommy dropped the real bombshell. "There's a file," he said. "Something your son wanted to keep hidden at all costs. It's called the Phoenix Protocol. If that gets out, Ashfall falls. But it's locked tight, digital, encrypted. Only Adam has the key. And now I know what I have to do. Find Adam. Get the protocol. Expose Ashfall. But here's the catch, Adam knows I'm coming. The game's changed. And I'm already a pawn in a much darker plan." Tommy Creed's cabin was a war room, but it was also a tomb. The more I learned in those cramped, musty walls, the heavier the air felt around me. Every word Tommy spoke sliced deeper into the mess I'd been forced into. "Ashfall isn't just a criminal ring," Tommy said, lighting a cigarette and exhaling smoke that blurred the grim outlines on the walls. "It's a phantom network tied to the highest levels of government and industry. You think your son's just some thug? He's the puppet master's apprentice." I swallowed hard. My mind raced back to the last time I saw Adam, at the barbecue before everything went to hell. His smile was tight, his hands shaking. I had chalked it up to nerves, but now I realized it was fear. Or maybe something darker. "Why did he do it?" I asked, voice rough. "Why the massacre? Why frame me?" Tommy shook his head. "Power. Leverage. Ashfall needed a distraction, a blood sacrifice to keep the heat off their operations. Your son volunteered you to save himself. The betrayal burned hotter than any prison cell ever could. I thought of Rosie, my granddaughter, the only light left in this nightmare. I had to protect her. I had to finish what Eliza started." Then Tommy handed me a small, worn USB drive. "This is your way in. It contains part of the Phoenix Protocol. The rest? Adam's got it. But this piece will give you leverage." I pocketed the drive, feeling the cold metal like a lifeline. "We're running out of time," Tommy warned. "Ashfall's already hunting you. They'll come for you in Iron Ridge first, then anywhere you hide. You'll need help." "Who can I trust?" I asked. He laughed bitterly. "That's the question, isn't it?" I left the cabin just as dawn was breaking, the sky bruised with pink and gray. The world outside looked peaceful, ignorant of the storm I was walking into. Back in Iron Ridge, nothing was the same. The parade route was cordoned off with fresh yellow tape. New murals replaced the old ones with my face. No one spoke to me in the streets. They only stared. I had one place left to go. Rosie. She was 14 now. Smart. Brave. The kind of kid who didn't ask for much, except maybe the truth. I called her, disguised my voice, and arranged a meeting at May's diner. I couldn't risk going straight to her, not yet. When I saw her sitting there, fidgeting with her bracelet, I almost broke down. She looked just like Eliza, but with Adam's stubborn chin. "Grandpa," she whispered, eyes wide. "Rosie," I said, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I'm sorry I haven't been there." She didn't say much, but I saw the questions in her eyes. The ones I couldn't answer yet. I told her only what I had to, that I was innocent, that I was fighting to clear my name, and that I loved her more than anything. She nodded, brave but scared. We were interrupted by a shadowy figure watching from across the street. Someone was following me. I grabbed Rosie's hand. "We need to move." That night, in a safe house Tommy arranged, I plugged the USB into a battered laptop. Files flooded the screen, emails, contracts, surveillance footage. I found a name that made my blood run cold: Elias Cade. A senator with a spotless record and ties to the military-industrial complex. Ashfall's puppet master. I realized something terrible. This wasn't just about my family. It was about the country. And maybe the world. I don't know how far this goes yet. But I know one thing for sure: Adam is watching. And he's waiting. The line between father and enemy has blurred. And the next move could cost me everything. The nights in the safe house were restless. Every shadow seemed alive. Every sound, a warning. I couldn't sleep, not when the noose was tightening around me and Rosie. The files on the USB painted a terrifying picture. Elias Cade wasn't just a puppet master, he was the architect of a new order, one that used fear, violence, and silence to rewrite the rules. Ashfall was his weapon. Adam was his heir. I knew I couldn't fight this alone. So I reached out. To someone I thought was gone from my life, someone who owed me a debt. Major Lena Morales. A former intelligence officer who disappeared after a scandal that wrecked her career. She was smart, ruthless, and the only one I trusted to cut through the lies. We met in a forgotten warehouse on the edge of the city. Lena's eyes were sharp, her jaw tight. She listened quietly as I laid everything out: the massacre, Adam, Ashfall, the Phoenix Protocol. When I finished, she didn't flinch. "Briggs," she said, "this is bigger than you know. Cade's reach is global. And if you want to take him down, you'll have to become what you fought against." I didn't like it. But I agreed. Our first move was to track Adam's closest contact, the one Tommy mentioned. A man named Marcus Hale, a fixer with a reputation for making problems disappear. According to the files, Hale was planning a meeting at a private club downtown. That night, Lena and I slipped into the shadows. The club was a fortress disguised as a jazz lounge. Dim lights, expensive suits, whispered deals. We found Hale nursing a drink at the bar. I approached him carefully. "Marcus," I said, voice low. "We need to talk." He looked up, surprise flashing before recognition hit. "Warren Briggs," he sneered. "I thought you were dead or locked away for good." "No," I said. "Just forgotten. Like a ghost." We negotiated. Hale wanted a trade, protection for information. He told us where Adam was hiding and, more importantly, revealed cracks in Ashfall's armor. But the biggest shock was what he said next: "Your son doesn't want this war. He's scared. And he's already planning to cut a deal. But Cade won't let him." I realized then that Adam was trapped between the devil and the deep blue sea. Ashfall wasn't just a criminal empire. It was a cage. That night, back at the safe house, I stared at Rosie sleeping peacefully. I promised myself I'd bring her the truth and a future free from fear. But first, I had to face my son. I never thought I'd see the day I stood eye to eye with Adam Briggs again. The son I raised. The boy I taught right from wrong. Now, he was a ghost wrapped in shadows, a man I barely recognized. The place was a forgotten warehouse near the docks, cold, damp, and crawling with the kind of silence that screams. Lena and I approached with caution. She carried a pistol tucked under her jacket. I carried nothing but the weight of a lifetime of mistakes. Adam was already there. Waiting. He looked older than his years, and every line on his face told me he'd lost more than just his way. "You came," he said, voice flat. I swallowed. "Adam. I need to understand." He laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "Understand? You don't know the half of it. I did what I had to do. Ashfall is bigger than us. It's a machine, and I'm just a cog. Why frame me?" I asked, the words cracking. "Why make me a monster?" He looked away, jaw clenched. "It was the only way to survive. If they suspected me, they'd kill us all. You were the perfect scapegoat, old, predictable. I raised you better than that," I said, pain sharpening my tone. "You raised me in a world that didn't exist anymore," Adam shot back. "The wars you fought, the enemies you made, they followed us home. I tried to fight it, Dad, but they swallowed me whole." He pulled out a small device, the key to the Phoenix Protocol. "I have it," he said. "But Cade's watching. If I give it up, we're both dead." For the first time in years, I saw a flicker of the boy I once knew, the scared kid hiding behind a man who'd made terrible choices. "Help me," he whispered. "Get me out." We agreed on a fragile truce. Lena and I would protect him, and in return, he'd help dismantle Ashfall from the inside. But the meeting was a trap. As we left the warehouse, headlights flooded the alley. Ashfall's enforcers. Guns drawn. Chaos erupted. We ran, ducked behind crates, and exchanged fire. In that moment, I realized something chilling: this wasn't just a criminal syndicate. It was a killing machine that didn't care who got in its way. We barely escaped, but the cost was clear. Adam was a marked man, and so was I. Back at the safe house, I sat with Rosie and Lena, feeling the weight of every choice. The fight had just begun. And it was bigger than blood. The night after our narrow escape, the weight of what had just happened settled like a stone in my gut. Adam was more than just a son I loved. He was a target, a key piece in a war that was far beyond anything I'd ever faced. Rosie didn't understand everything yet, but she felt the tension. She kept close, eyes wide with questions she didn't dare ask. Lena was already working the phones, tapping into old contacts, trying to map out Ashfall's next move. "I don't like how fast they reacted," she said, her voice low. "They know who you are, Warren. And they want you silenced." That hit me harder than the bullets we dodged. I was a man framed for murder, hunted by my own bloodline sins, and now every step forward felt like walking on razor wire. Over the next days, I pored over the files on that USB again and again, searching for anything that could give us an edge. The Phoenix Protocol wasn't just a set of plans. It was a blueprint for control, a chilling strategy to manipulate governments, control media, and influence elections. At its center was Elias Cade, the senator who hid behind smiles and speeches but pulled strings like a puppeteer. And yet, no matter how powerful Cade seemed, the files hinted at something more dangerous lurking beneath. A hidden layer, something called the Ember Directive. The name sent chills down my spine. Lena told me that the Ember Directive was a rumored phase of Ashfall's plan, one that involved biological agents and mass surveillance, aimed at breaking entire populations into submission. It was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a battle for freedom itself. The next challenge was clear: get the full Phoenix Protocol. But Adam was trapped. Cade's grip was tightening, and the longer he stayed with Ashfall, the less likely he was to escape. I knew what I had to do. We needed a distraction. A way to pull Cade's eyes away, even for a moment. I reached out to an old ally, someone with access to the media and the public pulse. Maggie Walsh was a journalist known for digging into dangerous stories and living to tell the tale. She owed me from a mission years ago, a favor I planned to call in. At a clandestine meeting in a noisy downtown bar, Maggie laid out her plan. "We leak what we have," she said. "Start small. A whisper about Ashfall's ties to Cade. Get people talking. Then, when they bite, we go bigger." It was risky. Once the news broke, Ashfall would come after all of us with a vengeance. But it was the only way. I looked at Rosie and thought about Eliza's voice, soft, unwavering, telling me to never give up. This wasn't just about me or Adam anymore. It was about breaking the cycle. Before we left, Maggie handed me a burner phone. "Keep this close," she said. "You're going to need it." Back at the safe house, I stared at the device. Every ring, every message could be a death sentence. But I had no choice. The night before the leak, I barely slept. Lena stayed up, running scans, tracking movements. Rosie slept on the couch, clutching a teddy bear I gave her years ago. When the first article hit the web, the response was immediate and explosive. Ashfall's shadow flickered for the first time. But with it came a terrifying realization: the deeper I dug, the more I became the hunted. Gunshots outside shattered the fragile quiet at 2 a.m. We scrambled to barricade the doors. Ashfall was sending a message: "Stop or die." I looked at Rosie and Lena. They were counting on me. And I wasn't going to let them down. The gunfire outside rattled the walls like thunder. For a moment, I thought the safe house was going to be our grave. Lena and I moved fast, shoving furniture against the door, grabbing what weapons we had. Rosie curled up in a corner, silent, but I could see the fear in her eyes burning brighter than any bullet. We didn't know how many were out there. Ashfall didn't play fair. They had eyes everywhere, and now, they had us trapped. I cursed every choice that led me here. Every secret I'd kept. Every lie I'd told my son. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the gunfire stopped. A silence that screamed. We held our breath. Waiting. Minutes passed. Then the phone buzzed. That burner phone Maggie gave me. A text: "We know where you are." No signature. No mercy. I looked at Lena, her face pale but fierce. "They're inside this city," she said. "They're closer than we thought." That's when I realized the nightmare wasn't just outside these walls. It was inside our circle. Because the next call came from a voice I never expected. "Adam." "Dad," he said, voice low, heavy with regret. "They're on to us. Cade's using everything to flush you out." I wanted to yell, to scream. To hate him. But all I heard was a fractured man trapped in a web far bigger than either of us. "Why?" I asked. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I was scared," he admitted. "Because I still care. But you have to trust me on this. I'm trying to take Cade down from inside." The line went dead before I could respond. The betrayal cut deeper than any bullet. I realized then, Adam was both my enemy and my only hope. We couldn't trust anyone. Not Maggie. Not the safe house. Not even each other. I made a choice. We packed what we could carry. Lena, Rosie, and I slipped out before dawn, leaving behind the only sanctuary we had. The streets of Iron Ridge were quieter now, too quiet. But I knew this was just the beginning. Ashfall was tightening its grip. And I was running out of time. We slipped out of the safe house under the cover of pre-dawn darkness. The sky was bruised purple, a cold wind cutting through the empty streets of Iron Ridge like a warning. Every shadow felt like a threat. Every footstep behind us a hunter. Lena led the way, her eyes sharp and alert, scanning every alley, every rooftop. Rosie clung to my hand like it was the last thing holding her to this world. Our destination was a small town 2 hours north, quiet, off the grid. Somewhere to regroup, to plan. But Ashfall didn't let go easily. As we moved, my phone buzzed again, another message on the burner, trust no one. That message hit harder than any bullet. I thought about Adam, the son I barely knew anymore, the man who was both betrayer and ally. Was he really fighting from within, or was this all a game I was losing? At a rundown gas station, we stopped for a moment. I watched Rosie sip water, trying to hold her fear behind a brave smile. This isn't over, I told her softly. No matter what happens, I promise you, we'll get through this. Lena checked the files on her tablet, mapping Ashfall's movements. Their reach is expanding, she said grimly. We're chasing shadows, but those shadows are starting to close in. I realized then that Ashfall wasn't just hunting me, they were hunting hope. Every place we ran to felt like a ghost town. People whispering, looking over shoulders. Trust had become a luxury we couldn't afford. That night, we camped in the woods, miles away from any sign of civilization. Lena kept watch while Rosie and I tried to rest. But sleep was a stranger. In the distance, I heard the faint hum of engines. Not close, but closing. Ashfall was coming. And this time, I wasn't sure we'd make it out alive. The forest was cold and unforgiving, but it was the only refuge left. As darkness swallowed the trees, I huddled close to Rosie, the weight of her small body a fragile anchor in a sea of chaos. Lena paced the perimeter, her every movement sharp and tense like a predator ready to strike. I wanted to believe this was temporary, that soon, we'd break free of Ashfall's grip and expose everything. But deep down, I knew the truth was far more complicated. Ashfall was no ordinary enemy. It was a web, woven so tightly it trapped everyone, friend, foe, family. I thought about Adam again. Was he still inside the belly of the beast? Or had he already been consumed? The thought twisted in my gut. Suddenly, a crackle broke the silence, the radio Lena had managed to salvage. Static. Then a voice, low and hurried. Briggs, it's me, Adam. Listen carefully. You're walking into a trap. They know your every move. My heart slammed against my ribs. How do you know? I whispered. They've been monitoring all comms. I managed to send this before they cut me off. The radio clicked dead. I looked at Lena. Her face was hard, but I saw the flicker of doubt. We need to move, she said. Packing quickly, we left the woods and slipped onto the highway under the cover of night. Every mile was a race against an invisible enemy. At a truck stop, I finally let my guard down long enough to call Maggie Walsh. I needed to know if she could amplify the Phoenix protocol leak, maybe expose Ashfall before they silenced us. Her voice was clipped but determined. The story's spreading fast. Cade's trying to bury it, but people are listening. You've got a chance, if you keep your head down. I wanted to believe that chance was enough. Days passed in a blur of shadowy motel rooms, hurried meals, and whispered plans. Rosie's laughter grew quieter, the weight of fear stealing her innocence one day at a time. Then, one evening, I opened the burner phone to a text that made my blood run cold. "You're running out of time, Colonel. Give up the protocol, or she dies." The "she" was Rosie. My hands shook as I read it. Ashfall wasn't just after me anymore, they were holding my granddaughter hostage. I told Lena. Her eyes went cold. "We're going to get her back," she said. "No matter what." I reached out to Adam again, desperate. We arranged a risky meet in an abandoned factory on the city's outskirts. I waited in the shadows, heart pounding, until he appeared, wounded, exhausted, but alive. He handed me a small drive. "This is the rest of the Phoenix Protocol," he said. "But there's more. Cade's been using biological weapons. The Ember Directive isn't just theory, it's real." I felt like the ground was falling away beneath me. Adam's voice softened. "You need to stop Cade before the next phase starts. And you need to find Maggie, she's the key to getting the truth out." Before I could ask more, sirens wailed nearby. Ashfall's enforcers were closing in. Adam vanished into the night. Back at the safe house, we prepared for a final push. Lena coordinated with Maggie to time the leak perfectly. Rosie clung to me, whispering, "Grandpa, please be safe." I promised her I would. The next day, as the story broke wide open, Ashfall's world began to unravel. Cade's allies turned on each other. Corruption bled out into the light. But the cost was high. Ashfall launched a brutal crackdown. Lena was injured protecting Rosie. I was forced to make impossible choices, who to trust, who to sacrifice. In those moments, I understood the truth of what Eliza always told me: sometimes, the hardest battle is not against your enemies, but against the darkness inside your own family. And as the country watched, waiting for the next move, I realized this war was far from over. The leak was out. The Phoenix Protocol exposed to the world. For the first time, Ashfall's carefully built empire showed cracks, fragile, but real. The media frenzy was relentless. Senator Elias Cade's name was splashed across headlines, politicians scrambling to distance themselves. Public outrage bubbled like a slow-building storm. But the storm wasn't enough to wash away the darkness. In the chaos, Ashfall struck back harder than ever. Lena's wound worsened, shrapnel embedded deep, infection setting in. The safe house no longer felt safe. Rosie's eyes grew wide with fear. She barely spoke, but I saw the weight of it in every hesitant step she took. I was no longer just a man on the run. I was a father, a grandfather, a warrior cornered by enemies seen and unseen. Adam remained a ghost, silent, unreachable. His betrayal haunted me, but so did his desperate attempts to help. One night, as I sat by Lena's bedside, her fingers weak but clasping mine, she whispered something that shook me. "Cade isn't just a politician. He's the tip of the iceberg. There's a deeper network pulling strings, one we haven't seen yet." Her voice faltered, but the fear was clear. I realized our fight was far from over. Ashfall was just the surface. The real enemy was something darker, something embedded in the very core of power. We had won a battle but were losing the war. And I wondered if I still had the strength to see it through. Lena's breathing was shallow, but her mind was sharper than ever. In the quiet of that dimly lit safe house, she laid out the truth that had been lurking beneath all the chaos, something more dangerous than Ashfall, more insidious than Cade. "There's a cabal," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "A secret alliance embedded within the government, the military, and corporate power. They control the flow of information, weapons, money, everything." I wanted to ask how deep the rabbit hole went. But even Lena's eyes betrayed the enormity of it. "They call themselves the Consortium," she continued. "Ashfall is their muscle, but the Consortium pulls the strings. Cade? Just their public face." The room spun. Everything I thought I knew about this fight was just the tip of the iceberg. "How do we fight something like that?" I asked. "How do we even find it?" Lena hesitated. We don't. Not yet. We start small, expose what we can. Use the Phoenix protocol to cripple Ashfall, then dig deeper. Rosie, curled up on the couch, barely looked up. Her innocence was a fragile shield against the storm raging around us. Over the next few days, we moved again, never staying long, always one step ahead. Lena's injury slowed us, but her resolve was unbreakable. We reached out to Maggie Walsh, who was risking everything to keep the story alive. She sent us encrypted updates, leaks, whistleblowers, secret meetings recorded in the dead of night. The more we uncovered, the clearer it became, the consortium's reach was global. Every nation had its puppets, every city its shadows. One evening, while sorting through intercepted communications, Lena and I found a name, Dr. Miriam Keller. A scientist tied to the Ember Directive, believed to be developing biological agents to suppress dissent. She's the key, Lena said. If we find her, we can stop the next phase. Tracking her wasn't easy. Her last known location was a covert research facility buried deep in the Appalachian Mountains. It felt like chasing ghosts. But the choice was clear. We had to go after her. The journey was perilous, old logging roads turned to mud, radio silence for miles. Lena drove with grim determination, while Rosie sat quietly, clutching a worn photograph of Eliza. At the facility, the silence was eerie. Security cameras covered every angle. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter. We waited for nightfall and slipped through the shadows. Inside, the sterile halls echoed with the hum of machines and distant footsteps. We found Keller in a lab, eyes wild but defiant. She wasn't the monster we expected, more a prisoner of circumstance, trapped in a system she couldn't control. I never wanted this, she said, voice trembling. The Ember Directive. It's a weapon of fear, designed to crush hope. She handed us data drives containing research, locations of other labs, and a list of collaborators. But as we turned to leave, alarms blared. We were trapped. Gunfire erupted. Lena pushed me down as bullets shattered glass and concrete. We fought our way through corridors, heart pounding, lungs burning. Outside, the cold mountain air hit me like a shock. Rosie was safe, for now. But the message was clear, the consortium would stop at nothing. As we disappeared into the night, I felt the weight of the fight ahead. It wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. It was about saving the future. And I was running out of time. The mountains faded behind us like a nightmare we barely escaped. Lena's arm throbbed where the bullet grazed her, but she refused to slow down. Rosie sat quietly beside me, clutching that worn photograph of Eliza like a talisman against the storm. We were fugitives, hunted by a shadowy consortium that moved with chilling precision. Back in the safety of a rented cabin miles from anywhere, I finally allowed myself to breathe, and to think. We had Keller's data. The locations, the names, the proof. But it was a double-edged sword. Exposing the consortium meant tearing apart a web that stretched from the highest offices in Washington to the darkest corners of the corporate world. And it meant making enemies who could, and would, destroy everything I loved. Lena looked at me with tired eyes. We're not just fighting Ashfall anymore, she said. We're fighting the whole system. And they have infinite resources. I nodded, knowing she was right. But there was one question that haunted me: who could I trust? I had lost faith in Adam, whose loyalties remained a dangerous mystery. Maggie Walsh was fighting on our side, but even she was a target now. And every new ally came with a risk of betrayal. That's when I heard the knock. A soft, deliberate tap at the door. I froze. Lena reached for her gun. I motioned her down. The door creaked open. Standing there was a man I never expected to see again. Detective Mark Reynolds. The man who arrested me. The man who convicted me. But there was something different about him now. No smugness. No arrogance. Only urgency. I'm not your enemy, he said, voice low. Not anymore. I wanted to slam the door in his face. To tell him to stay away. But something in his eyes told me this wasn't just a visit. Reynolds stepped inside, glancing around cautiously. They're watching me too, he said. Cade's network runs deep in the police force. I lost people trying to stop it. He pulled out a file, damning evidence linking corrupt officials to Ashfall and the consortium. Names, dates, financial transfers. This is the kind of proof we need, Reynolds said. But we can't trust the system. Not yet. We have to take this underground. I stared at the file, the weight of the battle pressing down on me. Could I trust him? Lena kept her hand on her gun, eyes sharp. I know what you're thinking, Reynolds said. And I don't expect you to forgive me. But we have a common enemy. We spent hours talking, sharing information, weighing risks, planning the next move. The lines between friend and foe blurred. As dawn broke, I realized this war wasn't just about survival. It was about rebuilding trust in a world designed to break it. And if we were going to bring down Ashfall and the consortium, we'd have to do it together. But the question lingered in my mind, who would be the next to betray us? Trust is fragile. I learned that the hard way. Detective Reynolds stayed with us only a few days, enough to share what he knew and point us toward a weak spot in Ashfall's network, a secure data center hidden beneath an abandoned government building downtown. It was a goldmine of information, and more importantly, a chance to hit back. But the plan was dangerous. If we were caught, there would be no second chances. The night of the break-in, the city seemed to hold its breath. Lena, Reynolds, Rosie, and I moved through shadows, every step heavy with tension. The building was a fortress, layered with security cameras, biometric locks, and armed guards. Reynolds hacked into the security system while Lena kept watch. Rosie clutched my hand, silent but steady. When the doors slid open, cold air hit us like a warning. Inside, the maze of corridors stretched endlessly, metal walls, blinking lights, the hum of servers. Reynolds led the way to the server room. 10 minutes, tops, he whispered. I watched Lena, muscles tense, eyes scanning every corner. We worked quickly, downloading files, extracting data that could expose Ashfall's deepest secrets. Suddenly, alarms blared. Red lights flooded the halls. They know we're here, Reynolds hissed. We sprinted back the way we came, dodging security teams flooding the corridors. At the last moment, Lena slammed a metal grate shut behind us, buying just enough time. Outside, the city lights felt both cold and indifferent. We were safe, for now. But the files we stole were only the beginning. Back at the safe house, Maggie Walsh's team started piecing together the data. The information was explosive, evidence of high-level corruption, illegal arms deals, and the consortium's ties to international terror groups. But with every revelation came new dangers. Our communications were compromised. Ashfall's retaliation was swift and brutal. One night, I found a note slipped under the door. Stop digging, or she dies. She was Rosie. The threat was clear. The war wasn't just about politics or power anymore. It was personal. And the next move had to be calculated. The note on the floor wasn't just a threat, it was a declaration of war. Rosie was in danger. And every second I hesitated, Ashfall's noose tightened. Lena and I scrambled to tighten security around the safe house, but the truth was brutal, no place was safe anymore. Ashfall's reach was relentless, and the consortium's grip stretched into places we couldn't see. That night, I sat beside Rosie as she slept, her small hand curled around mine. Her face was peaceful, but I felt the storm gathering inside me. I promised her I would protect her. No matter the cost. The next morning, Maggie Walsh called with news. The files we'd stolen were shaking the nation. Senators were being investigated. Corporate executives were resigning in disgrace. The consortium was cracking. But Cade was nowhere to be found. He had disappeared into the shadows, and I knew it was only a matter of time before he made his next move. Then came the call from Adam. His voice was strained but resolute. "They've got a facility on the outskirts of town, a hidden base where they're holding your granddaughter." I felt the ground drop beneath me. "Rosie. My Rosie. We have to move fast," he said. "I can get you in, but it won't be easy." I looked at Lena and Maggie, both understanding the stakes. It was a suicide mission, but the only option. That night, under the cover of darkness, we drove out to the facility, a sprawling compound camouflaged by dense forest and guarded by armed patrols. Adam met us at the edge of the perimeter, his face grim but determined. "We'll split up," he said. "I'll create a diversion. You get Rosie and get out." I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded. Inside the compound, every step echoed with danger. Cameras scanned the halls. Guards moved in pairs. The air smelled of chemicals and fear. I found Rosie in a small, windowless cell, terrified but alive. "Grandpa," she whispered, tears streaking down her face. I lifted her into my arms, feeling a surge of hope and rage. We made our way back, dodging patrols and alarms. Just as we neared the exit, Adam appeared, gunfire ringing behind him. "Go!" he shouted. We ran. But then came the sound I dreaded most, gunshots close, too close. Adam fell. Blood blossomed across his shirt. "Get her out," he gasped. I carried Rosie through the darkness, heart pounding. We escaped into the forest, the compound burning behind us. Back at the safe house, Lena tended to Adam's wounds. He was alive, but the cost was clear. The lines between friend and enemy blurred in blood and fire. That night, Rosie slept beside Adam, holding his hand. I sat alone, the weight of every sacrifice pressing down on me. We had won a battle. But the war was far from over. And now, the stakes were higher than ever. Adam's blood was still fresh on my hands when I sat in the dim light of the safe house, watching him fight to stay alive. His breathing was shallow, and the pain etched across his face was a constant reminder of how close we had come to losing everything. Rosie never left his side. She held his hand like it was the only thing keeping her tethered to this nightmare, and to the man she barely understood as her father. Lena worked tirelessly, her hands steady despite the exhaustion. "I've seen worse," she said quietly, but I could tell this wasn't one of those times. As the hours dragged on, I thought about everything that had led us here. The betrayal, the secrets, the family torn apart by shadows bigger than us. Adam was both my son and my enemy. And in this moment, he was my only hope. Days passed, and Adam's strength slowly returned. But the truth was clear, he was still a target, and so were we all. We needed help. So I made a call, to someone I never expected to hear from again. Agent Claire Donovan. She had been a thorn in my side years ago, working for a secret government agency with her own agenda. But now, the lines between friend and foe were blurred, and I needed every ally I could get. Claire agreed to meet, on neutral ground, with no promises. The meeting was tense. Her sharp eyes missed nothing. "I know Ashfall and the consortium better than anyone," she said. "But taking them down means playing dirty. You ready for that?" I nodded. For Rosie. For all of us. Together, we began to map a new plan. Claire had contacts inside the intelligence community who could feed us critical information and disrupt Ashfall's operations from the inside. But the cost would be high. She warned me that once we made this move, there was no turning back. Meanwhile, Rosie was learning to be brave in ways no child should have to. One evening, she asked me quietly, "Grandpa, will this ever end?" I looked at her, my heart breaking. "I don't know, sweetheart. But I promise I'll do everything I can to keep you safe." As the days grew darker, the fight became more than a battle for justice. It became a fight for survival, and for redemption. The next step was clear. We had to strike at Ashfall's heart. But Ashfall was already one step ahead. They'd begun to infiltrate our circle. And the question looming over us all was, who would be the next to betray us? The safe house was no longer safe. That much was painfully clear. Since Claire Donovan joined us, the pace had accelerated. Her contacts fed us whispers of Ashfall's moves, encrypted messages intercepted, financial transfers frozen, rogue agents exposed. But with every win came a shadow. We sensed it before we saw it, the subtle shift in the air, the way conversations faltered when certain names came up. Someone was leaking. The first hint was a message on the burner phone, "You're all dead men walking." No signature. No clue. I gathered the group, the fragile band of fighters united by desperation and blood. "We have a mole," I said, voice heavy. "And they're closer than we think." Lena's eyes narrowed. "I don't like this," she muttered. "Not one bit." Rosie, now old beyond her years, stood silent, her grip on my arm tightening. We went over everything, the files, the leaks, the recent security breaches. One thing was clear, Ashfall was dismantling us from the inside. Claire suggested a test. "We isolate information," she explained. "Feed different versions to each person. The one that leaks is our traitor." It was risky, but we had no choice. Days passed in tense silence, trust fraying at the edges. Then the inevitable happened. A supply run was ambushed. Weapons confiscated. Our safe routes compromised. That night, I confronted everyone in the room. Eyes darted, breaths hitched. The weight of suspicion was suffocating. Then Maggie spoke up. "I'm clean," she said firmly. "I've been targeted too. Someone wants this to fall apart." Adam, recovering but still weak, nodded. "I've been careful. But someone's playing a dangerous game." I looked at Claire. She was calm but guarded. "I want to believe no one here is the traitor," I said. "But the evidence says otherwise." We needed to flush the mole out. Using Claire's contacts, we set a trap. A fake operation, rumored to target a high-ranking Ashfall official. If the information leaked, we'd know who was feeding them. The trap was set. Within hours, the ambush came. But this time, we were ready. We tracked the attackers back to an abandoned factory. Inside, a shocking discovery awaited. A familiar face, Detective Mark Reynolds. He wasn't just a double agent, he was Ashfall's inside man. The betrayal hit like a punch to the gut. Reynolds sneered, "You think you can win? This is bigger than you. Always has been." Gunfire erupted. We took cover, returning fire, heart pounding. Lena was grazed but held steady. I confronted Reynolds as he tried to flee. "This ends now," I growled. He laughed, "You're a pawn in a game you'll never understand." We subdued him, but the damage was done. Trust shattered. We were bleeding from within. Back at the safe house, the atmosphere was grim. Adam looked at me, eyes haunted. "We're running out of time." Rosie, brave but weary, whispered, "Who else can we trust?" Claire's voice broke through the silence. "We keep fighting. We find allies. We expose the consortium. But we do it carefully." I realized then the truth I'd been avoiding. This war wasn't just about fighting enemies outside. It was about surviving the ones inside. And as Ashfall tightened its grip, the question remained, who would be the next to betray us? The air in the safe house felt thick, heavier than ever before. Betrayal wasn't a concept anymore, it was a wound bleeding raw and open. Detective Mark Reynolds' capture was supposed to be a turning point. Instead, it cracked the foundation beneath us. We'd fought a ruthless enemy in Ashfall and the consortium, but now we were fighting ghosts in our own ranks. The question that haunted every waking moment: who could we trust? Adam sat across from me, pale but burning with determination. "We can't keep hiding," he said. "We need to strike. Hard. Fast." I wanted to believe him. But the poison of betrayal made every move feel like stepping into quicksand. Lena, her arms still healing, sharpened her gaze. "We need to be smart. We can't afford another mistake." Rosie, holding tightly to the remnants of her childhood, spoke quietly, "I just want this to end." I clenched my fists. For her. For Eliza's memory. For the truth. We began with Reynolds. Locked away in a reinforced cell, he was a cage of rage and bitterness. Every time I looked at him, I saw the man who had betrayed not just me, but all of us. I visited him often, searching for cracks in his armor. Information was power, and I needed to know everything. Finally, after days of silence, he spoke. "You think this ends with me?" he spat. "Ashfall isn't a man or a group. It's a disease. The consortium? A cancer." His words chilled me. "They're deeper than you know," he said. Even I didn't see the full extent until it was too late. He revealed the consortium's next move, a plan called Midnight Protocol, a coordinated strike aimed at dismantling our resistance completely. "We're talking arrests, assassinations, disappearances," Reynolds said. "A blackout." The scope terrified me. But it was also a lifeline. If we knew the plan, we could fight back. We moved fast. Claire Donovan called in favors, rallying a small group of loyal operatives scattered across the country. Maggie Walsh prepared to drop a bombshell expose, one that would reveal the consortium's network to the public. But before we could act, the first blow fell. Lena was targeted. A car bomb detonated outside the safe house, shaking the building to its core. We scrambled through the rubble, finding Lena trapped but alive. Her injuries were serious. We had no time for grief. Rosie sobbed as I held Lena's hand, promising we would finish what we started. The attack was a message. Ashfall was closing in. We needed to strike. Adam, despite his wounds, volunteered for a high-risk mission. He was to infiltrate one of the consortium's key facilities, a data center housing files that could cripple the entire operation. Claire and I planned the details. The night before his departure, Adam and I spoke quietly. "Dad," he said, voice steady but with an edge of fear, "if I don't come back, promise me you'll protect Rosie." I looked into the eyes of the boy I once knew and the man he had become. "I promise." The mission was a success. Adam's team hacked into the facility, extracting terabytes of data. But it wasn't without cost. A firefight broke out. Adam was wounded again. We brought him back, but the toll was clear. The files contained explosive evidence, secret meetings, off-the-books weapons shipments, lists of compromised officials. Maggie Walsh prepared to release the information. But as dawn broke, the safe house phone rang. A voice cold and unmistakable: "This ends now, Briggs. Surrender the data or lose everything." The ultimatum was clear. We were running out of time. The days that followed were a blur of tension. We moved locations constantly. Every contact, every message, was scrutinized. Ashfall's reach was relentless. Then came the breaking point. Rosie was kidnapped. No ransom. No demands. Just silence. The fear that had haunted me turned into a desperate fury. I realized then that the war was no longer about justice. It was about survival. About family. Adam was furious but broken. "Dad," he said, voice shaking, "we have to save her. No matter the cost." I knew the stakes. We had to infiltrate Ashfall's strongest fortress, Elias Cade's hidden headquarters. The plan was reckless. But it was all we had. As we prepared for what could be our last stand, I thought about Eliza's voice, steady and calm from so many years ago. Sometimes, she'd said, the fight isn't about the battle ahead, but the strength you find inside yourself. I needed that strength now. For Rosie. For Adam. For all of us. The path ahead was dark and uncertain. But I would walk it. Because some lines, once crossed, cannot be undone. And some truths demand everything. The night air was thick with tension as we approached the compound. Elias Cade's hidden fortress, the heart of Ashfall's operations. A place where power was brokered in whispers and blood, where secrets were currency, and betrayal was the only law. We had no illusions about what awaited us. This was more than a rescue. It was a reckoning. Lena, still recovering but fierce as ever, checked her gear one last time. Rosie's hand trembled slightly in mine, but her eyes burned with a quiet strength I hadn't seen before. Adam, ever the soldier despite his wounds, mapped out our entry points with surgical precision. "We go in fast," he said, voice low but steady. "Disrupt their communications first. Then we find Rosie and get out." Claire Donovan, our uneasy ally, nodded. "I'll coordinate from a safe distance. But this is your fight." The drive to the outskirts was silent. Each mile was a reminder of what we stood to lose, and what we couldn't afford to fail. The compound loomed ahead, a fortress wrapped in razor wire, cameras, and armed guards. It was a maze of steel and shadows, designed to keep people out, or in. We moved under cover of darkness, sticking to the perimeter, avoiding patrols. Every step was measured, every breath held. As we slipped through a gap in the fence, Lena whispered, "Stay sharp." Inside, the compound was a twisted labyrinth, corridors lined with surveillance monitors, locked doors, and the cold hum of machines. Adam led us toward the communications hub, the nerve center we had to disable. The guards were fewer here, but no less dangerous. We neutralized them quickly but quietly. I felt my heart pounding not from fear, but from the weight of what this mission meant. Disabling their communications was brutal, wires severed, equipment smashed, alarms briefly stilled. But it was only the beginning. We split up. Adam and I took the west wing. Lena and Rosie stayed with Claire, providing backup and searching for a secure exit. The halls twisted and turned, each corner a gamble. We found her, Rosie, in a sterile room, surrounded by guards. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Grandpa." I rushed forward, heart in my throat. The guards reacted instantly. Gunfire erupted. I dove behind a console, shouting for Adam. He was already on the move, his face a mask of determination and pain. We took down the guards, each shot ringing with desperation. Rosie ran to me, and for a moment, everything else faded. But the mission wasn't over. We had to get out. The alarms blared again. Ashfall was waking up. We retraced our steps, but the compound was no longer quiet. More guards appeared, faster and more numerous. We fought our way through corridors slick with sweat and fear. At one point, Adam was hit again, a deep wound, but he pushed through. We reached the exit, but it was blocked. No way out but through. Claire's voice crackled in my earpiece. Extraction point compromised. Alternative route to the south gate. Move now. We sprinted through service tunnels, narrow and suffocating. Rosie's grip on my hand was fierce. She was scared, but brave. Emerging into the cold night air, we faced one final obstacle, an armed checkpoint. Lena stepped forward, raising her hands. A tense standoff. But then, a shot rang out. One of our allies, an insider who'd risked everything, took down the guard. We bolted through the gate, hearts pounding. The getaway was messy, a blur of screeching tires, gunfire, and sharp turns. But we made it. Safe, for now. Back at our temporary base, the relief was overwhelming. Rosie collapsed into my arms, tears flowing freely. Adam sat quietly, exhaustion finally catching up. I looked around at the faces I'd come to rely on, wounded, weary, but unbroken. The fight had cost us more than I ever imagined. But we had struck a blow. Ashfall's fortress was breached. Their grip shaken. Yet, the war was far from over. Because while we'd won this battle, the consortium still lurked in the shadows. And Elias Cade was still out there, smiling, scheming, and waiting. The sun rose over a world that no longer felt quite so certain. Ashfall's fortress had fallen, its walls shattered by our desperate strike. But the war, the real war, was still raging in the shadows. For months, we had run, fought, lost, and survived. We had lost friends. We had lost pieces of ourselves. But never hope. Now, it was time to face Elias Cade. The consortium's public face was a man who smiled for cameras and whispered lies behind closed doors. But beneath that polished veneer was a monster who thrived on control. We had evidence, damning proof from the Phoenix Protocol and the data Adam risked his life to retrieve. Maggie Walsh's exposé had gone viral, shaking the foundations of power. But Cade wasn't just going to surrender. He prepared his final gambit. The country watched with bated breath as hearings began, investigations that promised justice but threatened chaos. Lena stood by my side, her strength a beacon in the storm. Adam, scarred but determined, had become more than the son I thought I lost. He was a warrior fighting for redemption. Rosie, the light that had guided us all, sat quietly, clutching Eliza's photo, a symbol of the family we fought to protect. The hearings were brutal. Cade denied everything with practiced ease. His allies tried to discredit witnesses. The system groaned under the weight of corruption. But we had something more powerful than politics. The truth. And the people. Across the country, protests erupted, voices rising in a chorus demanding change. And then, a surprise twist. A high-ranking consortium member turned whistleblower, stepping forward with insider testimony that shattered Cade's defense. It was the moment we had prayed for. Cade was arrested. The nation exhaled, relieved, but wary. Because the fight for justice was just beginning. In the quiet aftermath, I sat with Rosie beneath the willow tree where Eliza was buried. The wounds of the past still raw, but healing. "Grandpa," Rosie whispered, eyes bright, "do you think it's really over?" I smiled gently, brushing her hair back. "Maybe not," I said. "But sometimes, just standing up and fighting is enough to change the world." She looked at me with hope. And I realized then that the story wasn't just about the darkness we faced. It was about the light we carried through it. Before I close, I want to ask, where are you from? Because stories like this happen everywhere, and sometimes the fight for truth begins closer than we think. Thank you for following this journey. If you want more stories that dive deep into the shadows and find the light, keep watching and subscribe.